evening. This is Karen Greenhouse. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and I want to welcome all of you. And just for the sake of the webinar, we are going to keep you all on mute and keep your videos off. And so if you need to communicate, you need to communicate through the chat panel. So if you kind of go down at the bottom of your Zoom controls, you should see the chat. You can pop that out if you want to kind of look at the chats as we go along, because I think Amy's going to be asking us questions. And let me just introduce myself. I am Karen Greenhouse. I am a math educator, and I work with Casio as a consultant. I'm their spokesperson, and I'm also an adjunct professor at Drexel University right now. And our speaker this evening is Amy Chow, so I will let Amy introduce herself.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening. As Karen mentioned, my name is Amy, and I am the National Training Product Manager at Casio. My majority of my responsibilities are coordinating workshops for schools and districts and conferences, and then also working closely with our development team on calculator updates and improvements. And one of the things we want to talk about today is our brand new graphing calculator, the 9750G3. So this is the emulator software that I'm working off of. Just to let you guys know, this software we always offer a 90-day trial period for our software, but currently because of everything going on with schooling, we are actually extending the software period until the end of December. So even if you download it now, after the 90 days, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but you'll be able to use it until the end of December. So basically right now you'll get like about a month and a half extra on top of the software. All right. Before we actually take a look, I just wanted to show the two calculators kind of side by side. Unfortunately, I can't open our previous model, the 9750G2 software, as well as our new software, but you can definitely see that the two calculators look essentially the same and everything is operating the same. I do have a poll for you just because I want to kind of gather or get a little bit of information about your background with Casio. So if you'll send out the poll is one asking if you are familiar with either the 9750G2 or the 9860G2. So I'll give you guys a few minutes or a couple seconds to answer that. Can we get 100%? All right. So as you can see, we actually have a good number of you who are familiar with our older models, the 9750G2 and the 9860G2, but there are a few of you that are not, which is fine. All right, thank you, Karen. So this is the 9750G2. It is a black and white graphing calculator. It operates, it was what I think about $50 retail. So it was a very good price for a graphing calculator that did everything essentially the TI-83 does. So we decided that we wanted to update our current models, and I'm going to make this a little bit larger so that you guys can see it better. Karen, does that help?
That does help, yes. Okay.
Good. All right, so this is the newer model. So a couple of things that if you're not familiar with Casio, the icon, we are an icon menu-based system. So when you first turn on the calculator, you'll see this main menu, and you can use the arrow keys here, left, right, up, and down, to navigate through the different icons so you can select where you want to go. And so a few of the new icons that were added to this model are E-activity, which is icon number 3. We also have spreadsheet. And then we also added, at the very last row, these 4 new icons down here, Python. So it's a MicroPython programming, and then a geometry, kind of dynamic geometry drawing tool, as well as Physium and a probability simulator. So if you're familiar with Casio at all, you'll recognize these from some of our other models that were already updated previously. The old 9750G2 did not have a lot of memory on it. That's why we were able to keep it at such a low price. So because of that, you really couldn't do a lot of updates to the calculator. But with the new model, we actually added a ton of memory to it. So now as we make updates, or if we fix things, or there's little bugs or errors, we can actually fix those and get those, get the calculators updated, software and hardware as well. All right, a couple of other things that got changed with this model. This button right here, right above 7, this is our fraction template. If I pull up that old image again, and we kind of zoom in, you'll see that, oh, sorry, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's zoom in a little bit. Above the 7, on the previous calculator, it said ABC, so kind of representing our fraction. So because we added a natural textbook display to this calculator model, we went with the natural textbook display look of a fraction like the students would see in our textbooks. Additionally, to the right of that button is the S to D button now. It used to say F to D. Now this is our standard form to decimal. It does the exact same thing. So if you're familiar with any of Casio's graphing or scientific technology, this button will toggle between standard form values as well as decimal values. So you have those options there. And then also at the bottom, next to the decimal point in the very middle, it used to say EXP, and now it's our times 10 to the X power, so a little bit closer to scientific notation than what it used to represent. All right. Let's actually go into Run Matrix. So a couple ways to get into Run Matrix. I can press the number 1, or to match with whatever is in the bottom right-hand corner, or if I have the icon highlighted, I can press Execute. And let's go ahead and delete that. So as you can see, if I wanted to enter a fraction, I will just press the fraction template, and now I can type in my values. I use the arrow keys to navigate through the different sections there that I want. Actually, let's not do that. I wanted to do shift fraction so I can pull up a mixed number template. So I'm going to add 2/3 and 3 1/2, and when I press execute, I get my answer of 25/6. Or if I press the S to D button, I can also convert that into a decimal. And then if you look above S to D and in a little bit smaller print, it says ABC to D over C. So that actually will toggle between your improper fraction, there we go, and our mixed number template. So you can see both solutions. So this natural textbook display has been added. And also if I were to take the square root of a value, I get my answer in my simplest radical form, so 2 square root of 6, and then I can toggle back and forth between decimal and standard form. So that's part of the reason why we changed that letter there from F to S. All right, now if I go into my setup menu, right, so it's over right here above menu, so I'm going to press shift and then menu. This is where the 9750G2 or G3, sorry, is unique. So you'll see that my input and my output here, it says math. So that's what we've been seeing, where everything is in that natural textbook display. You'll be able to simplify your radicals and different things like that. If you press F2 for line or linear, I'm going to press exit now, it'll actually go back to the way that the previous 9750G2 model looked. So in this situation, if you wanted to type in a fraction, you would actually have to start typing the fraction, and then you see that you have a little little L there to represent that you're dealing with a fraction, not necessarily using the division symbol itself. So if I wanted to add the same, do the same problem, 2/3 plus 3 1/2, that would be the way you would enter your mixed number, and then I press execute to get my solution. So you see we get the same solution, but everything is in what we call a linear format or in the line. So if you have students that are using the 9750G2, you can toggle back and forth between the different setups so that they can see what, what they're doing on their calculators also match what you're doing. That's one of the really neat things about Casio, and why I love Casio so much, is that our technology kind of translates through everything. You don't have to teach the students, different ways to do different things or to do the same thing on each of the different models. All right, so then we'll notice if we go back to shift and then menu, or not, there we go. Software is being a little touchy today. If you look at the last tab here, we call these tabs along the bottom of the screen, right above F3. If I'm going to select that, it says math and mixed. So if I press exit now, I'm going to clear my screen, and I'm going to do some of the same problems here. If I enter my fraction, you'll see that it looks exactly the same. Nothing was changed about our fraction when I enter it, and nothing changes about the solution. However, if I were to enter my radical, you'll notice that I cannot toggle that back and forth between our standard and decimal form. So anything that's or any of our rational numbers are going to, or irrational numbers. Hold on. Any of our square roots, our roots are going to be displayed in decimal form only. So this was definitely a request from some of the states that did not like that our technology could simplify, as Karen mentioned. And so this was just an option to allow the calculator to have the different formats so that we could be used for testing on in different states and all over the place. So the reason why we added the math and mixed is because another feature that was added to this calculator is what we call the exam mode. So essentially, if you're familiar with TI technology, they have what they call press to test. So it locks the calculator down, and it'll keep the students from trying to program things while they're in their tests. And different things like that. So if we go to link and you go under exam mode, when you enter exam mode, the calculator automatically shuts out the math input-output as well as linear input and output. And so the only way the calculator will display radicals is with that decimal. So it automatically the setup is going to be math mixed. So we added the setting there so that students could practice with that, so they're used to seeing what the displays are set as if you decide as a teacher or as a state that you want the students to use exam mode when taking their tests. All right. Are there any questions so far? Remember, if
I just did have a question. What else is shut down in exam mode? Just because I know that's often a question that people ask.
Yes. So we'll go back to link, and if you go back to F3 exam, if you go to application help, this will tell you all the applications that are restricted. So like e-activities, Econ 3, which is our sensor connections, and then your memory. So the kids can't kind of change any of the memory, any of the programming, and the Python, and then the add-in icons are also locked down. And in fact, we are getting ready to release an update not getting ready, but we're working on an update that's going to be released in October. For those of you that are teaching in Texas, last year Texas decided on their STAR test that they did not like the way that we did inequality graphing. So one of the things that they asked us to do was to lock down our inequality graphing. So on October 15th, we'll be releasing an OS update. So you'll have actually an additional 2 exam modes that will appear in this section. So one of them will be for Texas specifically, and one of them will also be for the Netherlands because they had some other additional features they wanted to have locked down for exams. And there are some other restrictive functionalities of vector calculations. That was a good question. Any other questions, Karen?
Not that I can see.
Okay. Remember, if you have a question, please drop it in that chat panel, and we'll do our best to answer them. Either Karen will answer or she'll stop me in and I'll answer them for everyone. All right, so that is our new display modes. So we have 3 different display modes now. So let's go back to run matrix, because another thing that we changed, and Karen did a whole blog post that was awesome about this. So I'm going to go back into my setup menu. And I'm going to go back to math. This is going to be the default when you turn your calculator on. I'm going to press exit, or go, actually not press exit. Something else, apologies. The calculator is being a little, software is being a little touchy today. All right, if I press the up arrow, you'll see that there is an option here for implied multiplication, and it can be either turned on or turned off. This was a request from some other, a couple of districts and states in the US, specifically because of this problem here.
The dreaded problem.
The dreaded problem. Obviously, if we were dealing with, so I'm going to leave this on and I'm going to press exit and go back. If we were dealing with a calculator and technology that could only write things in a line, like we saw previously in that linear input and output, these implied parentheses definitely change how we should ask the question regardless, especially because, you know, it can be so ambiguous that you end up with 2 different answers. So ultimately, the question that I always have when educators stop by is, what is the purpose of asking this type of question? Are we really asking it just to try to trick the kids? Because in all honesty, this is not the best, you know, representation of this problem. So let's take a look at this. So if we are treating this division symbol as a fraction, we have 2 options. Is it the problem 6 over 2, and then times the quantity 1 plus 2, which we would get the answer of 9, or did we want to group and put parentheses around everything to the right of that, what we would consider a division or fraction bar, where then the answer would be different and you would have 6 over 2 times 1 plus 2. And we would get a solution of 1. So, you know, the ultimate question, what are we really truly asking our students with that type of question? So if you were to just type this out, based on the symbols as it was originally given, you'll notice that we will give you the answer of 1, and you'll see that the calculator has actually added a second set of parentheses to tell you what it interpreted the problem as. So now we have everything in the denominator of our fraction, the 2 times the quantity 1 plus 2. You know, for example, if you had another different type of problem, 4 pi over 2 pi, you know, this is another kind of, you know, or another example of implied multiplication. You're multiplying 4 times pi and 2 times pi. We're going to get the answer of 2, right? Because if I also try to do it linearly, don't know why the software is being. You know, it'll automatically group the 2 pi together and divide all of that, you know, 4 pi by all of that.
So that's,
so we
that's
get this.
the new feature.
Yes, so that is the new feature with our implied multiplication on. So now I'm going to go back up into our menu, our setup menu. I'm going to arrow up, and now I'm going to turn implied multiplication off. And now when I exit and I try to do some of these same types of problems, so I'm going to do the very first one here. So 6 divided by 2 times the quantity 1 plus 2. I'm going to get the solution of 9 because the calculator is going in linear format in order, and you'll notice that it has not added those extra set of parentheses. So it's adding 1 plus 2, and then it's treating the parentheses here now as just a multiplication symbol. So we're going to divide 6 divided by 2 first, then multiply it by that 3. Similarly, if I were to type out 4 pi divided by 2 pi and press execute, the calculator is now doing 4 times pi divided by 2 and then times pi. So it's not grouping things together. And so then, you know, really we're talking about what is the impetus of what you're asking and how you're entering things. If we were to enter 4 pi divided by 2 pi as a fraction, automatically grouping the numerator and the denominator together, we are still going to get the answer of 2. So that takes us back to, you know, why are we writing things still as, you know, in a single line as linear when everything our students are familiar with in their textbooks and in most of our activities, hopefully, that we are giving them, everything's written in as a numerator and denominator in fraction form, what we like to call natural textbook display in this format here. Are there any questions about that?
Tom says, in linear format with implied off, what if there are parentheses around the 2 pi and the 4 pi?
If that's the case, and I'll show you, we can take a look at it real quick. As long as you put the parentheses in, and so we're in linear mode and implied multiplication is off. As long as you go ahead and put the parentheses down, the calculator will recognize that and they'll group it for you. The issue is if you don't put parentheses in and expect the calculator to either automatically group or not automatically group. So, and we can try it multiple different ways. So you'll see this in linear mode, it doesn't actually group anything because we had the implied multiplication off. And that's actually a good question as well, something that I have not tested. I'm going to turn.
Whoa, what was that?
Sorry, there's apparently people racing on the streets right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, it was a motorcycle that went by. That gets kind of loud. So I'm going to turn implied multiplication on. I'm going to leave it in linear mode. And now, instead of using the division symbol, I'm going to try it with the fraction symbol and see what happens, because that's something I have not tested out yet.
No.
Okay, so it doesn't, it's because implied multiplication is off, even though I use a fraction, it didn't group the denominator itself. So if I wanted to do that, I think I would just need to add parentheses myself.
Yeah. That's a great question.
So that's, yes, great question. Thank you, Tom, for asking that. And for
it all comes back to being precise, man.
Yes, definitely, being precise. And that's why even though linear mode is there, it's great that it's there, we just tend to not use it. So let me go back to my main menu, and I'm going to go to math again. I'm going to double check and make sure that's on, because I like that to be on, and I'm going to press exit.
Is the default that implied
default
is on?
Is on, yes.
Okay, that's good.
So the default settings on the calculators, whenever you open them up, take them out of the package or turn on the, open up the emulator software for the very first time, it'll default to math input and output, as well as implied multiplication on. All right, any questions?
Nope.
Nope. All right. So those are the two big things that we updated on this calculator. For those of you that are familiar with our technology, the reason I asked about the 9860G2 is because this is essentially the same type of calculator. We took the 9750G2 and upgraded it to essentially match the 9860G3 or G2, but kept it at a lower price. So we didn't quite update the screen itself. It's still the 9750G2 screen, and the body is very similar, as you can see from, let me open up my web browser. This is kind of what it looks like, or this is what it looks like, a little flat, but it's a better representation of the calculator itself, and you will see that it is still at a great price. It's $59.99 regular price, but I was looking actually at the Target website, and they have it on sale this week for $41.99. So imagine.
And in pink. So
and in pink and white. If you want, it's a light pink itself, and then yeah, if you're interested in some of the colors, these are the 3 different colors, which is why I was looking it up for you guys to see. But the pricing is amazing for technology that does this exactly what like a TI-83 and TI-84 calculator would do. At this rate, you could buy 2 for the price of one of those, maybe even 3, depending on what you're looking for. All right, so that's a little bit of that update. We talked about the OS updates and how you can do that. You will need basically a USB and calculator cable. A lot of those you have from other models. It's going to be the same from if you have an older Casio graphing calculator. They'll be the exact same. And then let's go back to the software. One neat thing that we added was QR codes in our catalog menu. So I'm going to press Shift and then 4 for catalog. And you can see now, you can scroll through the different things, and you'll notice the letter QR appear here. Let's actually find something that's, let's do that one, binomial CD for those statistic teachers there. So if I were to press QR on your calculator, on the software, it's actually going to open up a website. It's going to take you to the manual, an online manual, directly to that section that pertains to binomial CD. So we'll have to scroll a little bit, but right here, right? So this kind of tells you what that is and how you should input it into the calculator. If you have the actual handheld calculator in your hand, you would use your camera on your cell phone to take, or on your tablets, to take a picture of that QR code, and then it would take you to the same page as well. So that's one neat feature that we added, so that you could easily figure out what you need to do, and it takes you directly to the actual page where, what you're looking for, versus having to scroll through multiple pages of, a user guide. Delete that. I don't want to see that problem anymore. I'm going to press exit now, and then we also added this little history bar here, so you can see some of the history that, if you actually select something. And then above X6 is our category, so we kind of divided everything up by the different categories, so it's a little bit easier to maybe search for different things that way. All right.
So Amy, there was a question that said, is this calculator comparable and competitive to, I'm assuming, the TI? I answered it, but maybe you want to show, for those who are not familiar with Casio, just say the difference in where all of our stuff's right in the menu underneath the functions and how much
Yeah,
easier
absolutely.
it is? Yeah.
So I definitely think that our calculators are as comparable and competitive. I
More
work for
so.
the company, so you take this with a grain of salt, obviously. But I was a student. I live in Texas. So growing up, I used TI graphing calculators throughout my years in math and into college. And I was teaching in Texas as well, so I taught with TI technology just because that is what I grew up using and that's what I knew about. One of my team leaders actually started using Casio because Casio's always been price conscious. So our previous model, the 9750G2, was still $49.99.
Yeah, something like that.
So yeah, our retail price for that was $49.99. And so she was teaching a group of kids, our students, who were in what we called a double block math class. So they actually had math class for two class periods, because they needed a little bit of extra time and help. And so in order to help them out, she wanted a technology that they could have in the classroom and also be able to take one home, during that school year they were in that class. And so she started using Casio because she could buy two graphing calculators for the price of one. So she started using them, and then I started seeing, some of the benefits of it. And so I actually started teaching with them, and then ended up working for the company. So a few of the reasons why I love this technology so much better is mainly we have that icon menu. So you can navigate through based on what you want to do. So if I wanted to do any calculations, I would go to Run Matrix. If I wanted to do scatter plots and any graphing regressions, I would go to my statistics menu. If I wanted to do any graphing, I would go to Graph. I can go to my table to do tables. I have a conics that's built in already. And so you just arrow through the different things. So I see a question that popped up is, how do you get to the main menu? So the very first time you turn on the calculator, you're going to be at the main menu. But you'll see right here on the top second row, technically, is the menu, the word menu. So if you're in anything or in any icon itself, let's say I was in my Run Matrix, I'm going to press exit, and I want to go back to the main menu, I'm going to press menu. All right, so that's kind of like, it's like having the home button that you're used to on like your phone. And then, so let's go to graph. So I use my arrows to go to graph. I'm going to press execute. And, oh, I already have an equation in. So x squared, I'm going to actually change this a little bit. So I arrow to the right, and I'm going to do x squared minus 5.
And while she's doing that, I just want to say one of the differences that I note is she's in the graph menu and everything she needs is right there on that screen. So like I can change the type right there, or the style, or so that's a big difference for the Casio calculators is you don't have to go find what menu to go into. Whatever you chose, all the things you need are right there for you.
Yes, that is definitely one of the benefits. So you'll notice we have tabs across the bottom, and you'll see tabs every now and then, depending on what you're accessing. And so all our menu options for graph are going to be under these tabs. If they're not there, they're either under setup or they're under other options. And so I'm going to press draw now because I want to view that. Actually, let me double check my window real quick. All right, so now I'm going to draw, and so you'll see that the calculator has drawn my quadratic, x squared minus 5, but I can't necessarily see the vertex, which we all know is very important. And so if I want to see that, I can go in and go to view window and change my view window, but most of our students are used to the fact that I just want to scroll up a little bit, right? So I'm going to just press the down arrow, and you'll see that the calculator has scrolled or just moved the window just slightly for me, so that within a few seconds I can see fully what that quadratic graph looks like. Right? And a lot of times when we see quadratics, we want to find the roots or the zeros, we want to find the max or the min, we want to find a y-intercept, different things like that. So that's all under GSolve or Graph Solver. So I don't need to press the shift button because within the graph setting, the calculator recognizes that if I press F5, I want to go to Graph Solver. So we press F5. And so now you can see this is what Karen mentioned earlier. These are all tabs. So they're not covering up my graph itself. So I can still see that graph and I can say, all right, let's start with finding my, is it our max or a min? Well, looking at the graph, I know that it goes down and then goes up. So we're looking for a minimum. So I'm going to press F3. And that was very quick. There was no having to, use your arrows to move the cursor to where you want it to kind of find.
Isn't that what TI does? Is it's a silly range?
It's a silly range, the lower bound, upper bound, and then you have to guess for the calculator. That was always a great question. The calculator is like $120. Why do I have to guess for it? So there's your minimum. And now if I want to go back and find my roots, I'm going to press F5 for GSolve again, and then I'm going to press F1 for root, and there's my left root. And then if I want to find, I know for a fact there's another root, right? We all know it's right here to the right of my left root. So I'm going to press to the right, and there is my other root. So there's no having to go back through all the steps and using the arrows and setting up the boundaries for that spot. And I can just toggle back and forth between my two different roots. So it's just taken a lot, Casio has taken a lot of the calculator button pushing memory button pushing that you're required to remember in order to actually do stuff on the calculator. They've taken all of that out and made the calculations and technology a lot more intuitive, in my mind.
There's a question.
Yes.
That I think I knew the answer to, but I want to verify. They wanted to know if the USB cables are included in the calculators when you buy them new. And I think the answer is no, right?
I think they decided to not include those anymore, just to kind of cut back a little bit on cost. If you do need a cable, because you toss some of the older ones that you had away, if you will just email calc training, and I'll type up that email here, with your name and your address and a phone number, we can definitely send you one because we always have extras. Unfortunately, that is more of the common case. And then the calculators, they don't come with an actual user manual. I thought they had, I think we all went digital.
Yeah, it is digital. You can download the PDF. Yeah,
so if I remember correctly, there should be a little document that comes within like a little piece of paper that helps you figure out where to go. But if you're not able to figure it out or find it, email calc training and we'll help take care of you guys. And we'll send you a copy of the user manual. It'll be in PDF format, but yeah. Another thing is, like I said, on this calculator, if you just click Shift Catalog, well, in Run Matrix, remember, not that one. If you press Shift and then Catalog, you can start typing letters here too. So if you want to figure out how to do, I don't know, let's say probability or something, or product, you can start typing letters out and it'll automatically jump to that section. And then if you press the QR code, it'll automatically take you to the page that talks about it. So that's another option instead of having like a printed.
But that's only if you're in the emulator though.
That is only if you're in the emulator. But if you have the calculator, it does the same thing with, if you take the picture on your cell phone of the QR code and allow it to open up a web page, it'll open it up for you to this page itself. So calc training is your go-to if you have any questions. Make sure you copy that email down. All right, let's go back to graphing.
Maybe show them what the inequality issue was that Texas didn't like.
You. That Texas did not like. I don't agree. I live in Texas again, and this just did not agree with it. We've been doing this ever since we launched our graphing calculators, so it's been going on for a long time. So if I wanted to, let's say, convert to this equation into an inequality, let's say y is greater than or equal to x squared minus 5, I'm going to go into type because I want to change the type of graph that I want to draw. So I'm going to press F3. and you can see here, you can press some of these, you'll see the tabs here. And then this tab above F6 tells you that there are more options to look at. So there are more tabs. So if I press F6, you'll see there are my Y inequalities. If I press it again, I have X inequalities. So I can graph X in terms of Y as well. But because I already have an equation in my graph function there, I'm going to actually convert. So I pressed F5, and now I'm going to choose, we say greater than or equal to, so F4. So now you'll see the calculator has actually converted that symbol, so it's not an equal sign anymore. And when I press draw, the calculator automatically shades for me. So text
make it be not equal, so they can see the difference.
So I'm going to go back and let's convert that now to greater than. How's that?
Because wasn't that the issue?
No. Well, the issue is that for those of you familiar with TI, you realize if you're not using the Inequality app, you would arrow over to the left and you would have to pick whether to shade above or below the diagonal. And so it doesn't quite determine. And then it also didn't, let me just enter a new one because that one doesn't quite show it. Just do X minus 2. So you'll see that with this, now that I have Y2 is less than X minus 2, I have a dash line there. It will also show the shading in the dashed. So that is something that the TI technology without their new Inequality app does not allow. You could only shade, either shade above or below, and you could only draw with a dashed or solid line.
And the students have to choose it, right?
Right, the students would have to choose, and they could kind of figure that out on their own, versus the technology essentially interpreting it for them, I guess you could say. But in my mind as well, if we're just asking students to draw inequalities on a test, especially like a final exam, like a course exam, then there's more to it than just that. Once again, what kind of questions are we asking students that's all we're asking them to interpret? You know, different things. So I'm going to step back off my soapbox. So those are the big things. We've always been able to graph, you know, the different types, and that's one of the neat things too, is I can graph multiple types of graphs, multiple types on the same grid. So I can graph a polar, a parametric, and x equals. So x equals, let's do 2. Try to keep it in that window.
All right, do a parametric, Amy. No, I'm just kidding.
Sure. Do you have an equation for me?
No. I was just kidding. I always have such a hard time with those.
I know. I always have a hard time remembering. I'm not used to having to teach that anymore, so it's hard to remember sometimes. So those are kind of the different things. Can I go through equation storage? James, can you clarify a little bit more what you're asking? I'm not quite sure. So you can store, I guess, equations if you were to create like a program. That's really the only place you would store equations. But if you're using exam mode, or if you were to reset your calculator, they don't quite get saved.
But if you just have the graph open and you have many graphs, they all will save and be there the next time you open it up. Yeah.
So like I
really
went out to the main menu. If I go back to graph and I press exit, if you arrow up, you'll see that all my other equations are still there. So input values for variables. Okay, so that goes into our equation solver. I think is what they're asking. So I'm going to go back out to main menu. And I'm going to go down to the equation icon. So here, if I don't have that icon highlighted, you see it's a letter A. So if I just press the X theta T button that correlates with A, which is in red, it'll jump me to that icon. And then I'm going to go to F3, our solver. So this is where you can enter an equation with multiple variables, but you can only enter one equation at a time. So for example, one of the ones I like to do is a squared plus b squared, not log squared, b squared, and then equal sign is above the decimal in yellow, equals c squared. And if you've been using your calculator already and you've done things with the variables a, b, and c, you might see values there, but I have not, so they're still all set to 0. So this is where you can say, let's say a is 3, b is, we know, a simple one, a triple, c is 5, and then now I want the calculator to find b. So b is, so I'm going to highlight b and then press solve. And so now b is 4. And then the left and the right here just tell you that the left side is equal to 25 and the right side is equal to 25, so b is your actual value. How do you store calculator output? So it depends on how much you're trying to do. You can store values with all these different letters here. This is the store key right here, this arrow key here, but you can really only do that in the run matrix. So before I move on to that, I just want to make sure, I wanted to see if there were any other questions related to this equation solver.
I have a question. Is this shut down if you're in exam mode? I would think a teacher would want that shut down.
It's not.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's not. Just because it's actually a feature that's on other calculators as well. But once again, like, it doesn't do a lot of the complex stuff on here. So if you're just asking the students to find the Pythagorean using, a triple or a value in the Pythagorean theorem, maybe we could just do that by hand instead, just kind of change how you're asking the question. But, it could be something, hey, if they really need to use this to find the answer and then use that answer to solve something else.
Right. That's
yeah.
good questions.
Yeah. It's all about the questions. All right. So now if I go back up to run matrix, this one isn't great. So let's go back to that square root. Let's do the square root of 24. So let's say I still wanted to use that answer. I haven't touched anything else on the calculator. So if I press the arrow key here, it shows that I'm taking that previous answer and I can store it as, let's say, alpha g, just because it's close and easy. So now I can use that and I can say, well, I want to multiply g times, let's say, this square root of 6. Right, so 2 square root of 6, 2 times the square root of 6 times the square root of 6 gives us 2 times 6, which is 12. So that's one way to use the calculator output. I don't know if there was another question that you might have, Zachary, as to what you're trying to ask. But you can also, you don't have to have an answer there if you want to just store 25, as a different letter. You can just
so
do
you're
that
always
as well.
storing it as a variable.
Yes, so you're always storing it as a variable. And so I could have actually also stored it as one of the variables I already used, A, B, or C. And then that would override whatever I did previously. So actually, if I look right now, if I type in B and I press execute, you'll see B is 4 because we had done that Pythagorean question. We solved for it. So now I can say, well, I want B to be 23 now because I'm using it for something. And so now B will be 23. So B times 2 is 46. So now I've overridden that. So that's it on that. Any questions? Is there anything else you guys want to see on the calculator? If not, I'm going to kind of go into talking about all the resources we have for this model and for some of our other graphing calculators. As I mentioned, it actually,
do you see that question from Zachary?
yes. What does capture and clip? So capture will actually capture, I believe, I haven't done this in a long time. So I think if I highlight 46, I think I can capture and it'll store in one of my memories. But it is probably better to capture like do a screenshot, or you can capture and paste, I think, different things. So let's try that.
Tom is saying you can capture an expression.
Yeah, so it can help you capture expressions. So I'm going to save that 46 in there, and then let's paste. Let me move down. Oh, look. Well, clearly it's related to your computer, because I actually had previously captured this URL link, or this tiny URL for another webinar we're doing, and so it pasted that.
That's funny.
That is interesting.
That is interesting.
All right, so we'll have to do a little bit more research.
Yeah, honestly, I've never used them before.
Yeah, I've never used capture and clip before, so I'll have to do a little bit more research. Definitely not one of the features that you might use a lot, but I think it also helps with capture and clip if you are in what we call e-activity. So essentially, e-activity is creating a activity within the calculator. And so it allows you to jump between the different icons. And I think when it comes to that, or if you're in programming or in Python, you can capture and paste or clip and paste, a lot of different things. That's probably what clip is.
You don't have to retype them over.
Yeah, so you're not having to retype like an equation over and over again when you're doing programming or typing out, activities and different things on the calculator.
Okay, so
all right.
folks want to see the other resources.
Yes, because we're getting close to the end of time. So this is the 9750G3. As I mentioned, right now we are giving you a free gift of a USB 5-in-1 charger. If you are interested in purchasing one. If you go to our homepage and you scroll down to this remote learning section, this is where, and click on that button, this is where you will see all the different things we have to offer for remote learning right now. So one thing you'll notice is our emulator software, which is what I was using, the free access period has been extended until December 31st. Now, if you click on this Learn More button, it'll take you to this page here. And then you'll go to this section here to click for details. And I apologize for having to go through different pages, but it's kind of what we needed to do. You can have the option of downloading the software if you do not already have it on your computer. If you already have it on your computer, the software, then you'll need to download an extension patch, which is the second button. So the software that I'm using is this one here. It doesn't specifically say the 9750G3, but anything that has a G3 is going to be in the same series. So this calculator is actually a US or North America model only. So it is, unique to just the US, and it is part of this series. There is still a 9860G3 out there, but it's not a calculator that is going to be sold in the US anymore, or at all.
At all, yeah.
Yeah, at all. So that's what you would do, and then you would download the patch, and then you would run the patch, and then it would be able to extend your software till the end of December. So that's definitely something neat. This will only work with laptops that have a Windows-based system. Unfortunately, we don't have Mac software, so I apologize for those that are Mac users, and it does not work on Chromebooks because it's an executable file. So it's only a Windows-based computer software. All right, back to the remote learning page. We also have a bunch of free activities. We took all our workbooks and uploaded them and set them apart individually. So you can go through here and see. Right now, the only file we have available are some simple activities, but I think we only have a handful of activities available right now. We are working on getting more up there. So I think we have one from like each workbook. So we have an algebra.
Let's also say,
Mhm.
if you have any Casio graphing calculator, even
Correct.
if the activity says it's the CG50, you can use the 9750G3.
Yes,
that's the beauty
absolutely.
of Casio, is the functionality is basically the same.
Yeah.
So activities would work on any graphing calculator.
Right, absolutely. So any of these from the 9750G2 or the 9860G2, any of those, or the CG10 or the CG50, all 5 models, the buttons are all in the same spot. The functionality is essentially the same. The only difference, remember, with the G2 is that it is only in that linear input and output. So things are going to look a little bit different as far as screenshots go.
And the 10 and 50 are in color.
Yeah, and the 10 and 50 are in color. So those are really the main differences. And then the 9860G2 and the 9750G3 are essentially the same calculator. This is our Prism CAS model. So the button pushing is definitely different on this model. And it is also a computer algebra system, so it's not allowed for use on most standardized tests. So if you were to, let's say, go to the 9750G2 and click middle school, we have a list of all the activities here. So you can, arrow up and then type out, let's say I wanted to go to minimum wage. That starts on page 40. So if you hover over the top, you can change the page number pretty easily there, typing in the page you want and then hitting enter, and it'll jump directly to this page. And then if you want to download the file, you can and use it in your classroom. So all our activities have like a teacher notes page, a how-to section. If you were to use this or do something similar on the calculator, here are the screenshots and step-by-step buttons. And then our activity page with questions, and some of them have extensions, some of them don't. And then a solutions page for you guys as well. Let's see. And then
YouTube?
That's where I was going next. And then, thanks for reading my mind. We have a Casio Education US YouTube page that has a bunch of videos on there. We are working to put more and more 9750G3 videos, but as Karen mentioned, the steps and as we keep saying, everything's pretty much very similar, or almost the same. So if you go to playlists, we've got them separated out. So we've got 8 videos on the 9750G3, but you can also take a look at the CG50 graphing calculator or the combination of the videos here. So those are all different options there. All right, any questions? If that's it, we will be sending a follow-up email. Let me open
with the recording. This webinar is recorded, so
yes, with a link to the
that'll be up by tomorrow.
Which will be up by tomorrow, as well as I will send you links to all the different resources we talked about. A link directly to the Casio Cares landing page that takes you to everything else. So just to let you guys know, we have a bunch of upcoming webinars. The ones that are highlighted in this teal are ClassPad.net webinars, so you can find those and register for those on that website. And then on August 27th, we're going to take a look at all our graphing calculator technology. So if you're interested in learning more about like our CG50 and the CG500, feel free to join us on that one. We're just kind of going to compare all the different models that we have. And you can register for that one on the Casio Education Webinars landing page. Additionally, Karen, do you want to talk about this one?
What am I talking about? Throw me for a loop here. Oh yes, we have started an equity in education series. We've already done 2. We had one yesterday, and this is in partnership with TODOS and also the Benjamin Banneker Association. So we have a couple of them each month. I think some months we have like 3 or 4. So our last one for August is August 26th, and I believe the speaker is Dr. Pamela Seda, that's it. And then in September, our first one in September will be that's also Benjamin Banneker. So
Yes.
join us for those. Those are just so interesting. It's really about how do you make your math classroom equitable and accessible for all students. So those are additional webinars that we're doing, and they are also found on our webinar page.
And those are the links also if you want them here. All right, to register. And lastly, thank you guys for joining us. As we mentioned, don't forget to download that free emulator software and follow us on social media. We'll be posting about all these different things that we have to offer, our activities and other webinars. And if you would like a certificate of attendance because you attended this live webinar tonight with us, you can either email calctraining@casio.com or you can respond back to the email when we send out the follow-up tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you guys for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was great.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.